Well, good morning. Good morning, Gail, and good morning, everyone
Morning.
out there who's coming in to watch this interview with Gail, the amazing book writing coach, Gail Tagarro. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you, Karen.
How are you today?
Yes, I'm really well, thank you. So good to be
I just
here.
realized that's really good. I have trouble with the opposite to mirror image, and I'm moving in the middle. I'm trying to get myself in the middle of the screen. So, Gail, it's wonderful to have you here. And I know we've had a few glitches this morning. Thank you so much for bearing with me.
You're welcome.
Okay, so as we know, people out there watching as well who will come in during the session, or it's going to go live and go out there and be streamed. We're doing these series for entrepreneurs' journeys and people I know and respect who have come along this journey and got to where they are now through different learnings and challenges and experiences. And so we all know that being an entrepreneur and an owner of a business takes real courage. It's very, very different to being an employee. And each one of us has a different journey and has different challenges and different learnings, as I said, to get our businesses up and running and to achieve what we've gone into business to achieve. So this morning we have this interview with Gail, which is a conversation between us. It's raw, it's real, and it's going to bring up some things for Gail to go through and answer some questions around her journey. So let me tell you a bit about Gail. Gail Tagarro is a book writing coach, accredited editor, and published author of historical fiction. Gail runs 6 different book coaching and book writing programs. She is a qualified journalist with an MA in Linguistics, and Gail has been working with writers since early 2000s, so she's not new to the game. She's an empathetic writing coach and editor. She brings a unique perspective to helping aspiring and published writers bring their fiction and nonfiction books into the world. So I met Gail, I don't know how many years ago did we meet, Gail? Maybe 4?
Something like that, Karen. Yeah.
And I was really taken with Gail and attracted to you, Gail, because you're very different to a lot of the other book writing people who provide book writing programs and book writing coaching. And so one of the things I noticed is your qualifications around, and one of the things that we've talked about together, haven't we, Gail, that you actually do help people to get it right, to get the grammar and the spelling, or more the grammar, as well as their stories.
That's right.
Yeah, so Gail, I'd like to ask you, what made you get into this business and why are you in it?
So, Karen, I've always loved writing and I guess you could say editing, but editing came later in life. So it took me a long time really to come to decide what I wanted to do. I wasn't one of those typical people out of school, who knew, okay, I want to go do a degree, or I want to go work in such and such a place. I went traveling. So I was only 20 when I, like you, was born in New Zealand and left New Zealand and went traveling. And did lots and lots of different jobs that, were not necessarily very fulfilling, but I really just didn't know what I wanted to do. It wasn't until I was 30 that I'm married and back in New Zealand that I decided to do a degree, and I did, I did a bachelor's and then a master's in English and Spanish, and then realized when I finished those 2 degrees that in terms of getting a job in the corporate world, it was pretty useless. So anyway, I did actually get a job in a bank as a technical writer. The bank at that time was implementing a whole, electronic banking system, which today we take for granted, but, back then there were no electronic signatures or anything like that. So it was a huge project, and I was taken on to be, the liaison between the techies and the end users, and to write all the end user technical documentation for actually using the banking systems, and also all the policy and procedures. So that kind of started me off, because then I worked there for a few years, and then I worked for another much smaller company, and then decided I was going to go out on my own. So that was the beginning of working in my own business. So I ran a technical writing consultancy for 15 years, working with corporates like Air New Zealand and Telecom and Vodafone, so really big companies. And then we decided to move to Australia, and I'd got to the point where I really needed a break from the technical writing. So I took a year off work and wrote my novel. And then all kinds of things happen, as life does. And I wondered, what am I going to do now? So then I thought, well, I've always loved writing, I've always loved editing. I think I'd be good at editing. So I started to sort of promote myself a little bit as an editor. And then I had the opportunity in 2007 to sit the very first exam for to become an actual accredited editor, which is it was the first time that there was actually a qualification, a professional qualification for editors in Australia and New Zealand. So I sat that and got that qualification, and then spent, many years working with lots of different writers in fiction and nonfiction books. I think that's something I've been very lucky with, because many editors sort of, they specialize in, say, academic editing, write theses and things like that, or fiction or nonfiction, but not many people I've found do both nonfiction and fiction, and I really love that diversity. So after many years of just working with people on editing the books that they'd already written, I realized that there was a big gap in the fact that many people weren't even ready, like they hadn't written a book, or they'd written or started and they just weren't happy with it, and they weren't confident to keep going. And so that's when I started the coaching. And initially it was fairly informal, but then I, over the past 2.5 years, I've created, the 6 different programs, ranging from very kind of basic right up to a 6-month one-to-one mentoring program. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow. Wow, Gail, I've learned a whole lot about you. I didn't know all of that background that you have with regard to the technical writing, especially.
Yes.
And I guess, the technical writing would have been very, very different to what you do now.
Yes. It was a good discipline, it was a
Yes.
good discipline, because you can't waffle. It has to be very specific and really very clear, so that the person using the documentation can understand it straight away.
So, Gail, was it a bit like procedures manuals when you were doing the bank work?
There were procedures manuals, policy manuals, and technical guides. Yes, everything.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, there you go. So you've got a whole lot more background and experience that probably many people don't know about.
Probably.
And so what else? Oh, yes. So you said you sat that editing accreditation, and was that
right.
what you were judging, or that you were working in Brisbane the other day doing? Was it the same exam?
Yeah. So since I gained that qualification, I've then they have the exam around about every 2 years, and so I now volunteer as an invigilator or supervisor at the exam every time it comes up. So yes, that's
Wow,
exactly where I was.
that's what it was.
Mm,
Wow, okay. Well, that's a really interesting story, Gail, and, you've
you.
come a like we've said, you've come a long way, and isn't it great how we do often, reinvent ourselves every
Yes,
so many years,
yes.
and I think that's one of the differences between entrepreneurs and people who are willing to do that and people who get stuck in the rut of having a job and staying in their security blanket in their
Mm,
comfort zone, and
yes.
so really there is, yeah, it's a very different type of skill and courage that I think people like you have.
And you?
So
Yes, there's
yeah.
certainly nothing secure about it, is there? Like, it's not a security blanket, it's always changing, and you have to, be prepared for that.
Yes,
Mm,
absolutely. So, Gail, I have a question for you.
mm.
What do you believe is the most important thing in business for you, in your business for you? What is it that's really important for you?
Well, it may sound like a cliche, but, it's so good when I work with someone on writing their book, and usually I'm working with people who've never written a book, or if they have, it's kind of been, they've just sort of done what they thought was the right thing, but,
Mhm,
most of the people I work with, that they haven't written a book before, so they lack a lot of confidence a lot of the time. And I mean, this might be people who in their normal life, they're really high up in their professions, but when it comes to writing a book, they're not. They're complete beginners. So to work with someone who's never written a book before and who really wants to, and it's it could be a novel, or it could be a book about their business, or it could be a self-help book, is working with them and just seeing how they blossom over the time that they're coming along on the writing journey. So that's what I love about what I do, just seeing people grow and get self-confident and feel really happy when they produce that book, because I mean, let's face it, it's a huge thing to write a book.
mm.
Mm.
Yeah, so tell us a bit more about that. Tell me about what you think goes on for people when they decide to write a book. Um, Because, I've said to you, I've got no desire to write a book.
Mm.
However, people are saying to me, you should write one. You've got a book in you. And so I'd love to know that, from when people decide, yes, I do want to write a book, and then they start and they come to you. This is your people, not anyone else, people who you're helping. And then they go through that process. And like you say, you tell us more about that lack of confidence around that they or the things that come up for them when they're
Mm.
writing, and then how you get them through that,
Mm.
and
Sure.
what is the transition for them.
Sure. So, one of the most common issues that people have when they're writing a book is they don't know where to start. So, I'll just give you an example of one of my clients, and I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning his name, and that's Darren Mort in Melbourne, who's a barrister. In fact, he just won Barrister of the Year 2 or 3 weeks ago. So Darren, the very first session that we did, I said to him, okay, so we're going to work out the whole structure of your book. So we're in our first session, which was an hour and a half. So, and the 6-month book writing academy program. I said, we're going to map out all of your chapters. And we did. We mapped out all of his chapters. He was using a specific. I won't give away the secret because his
Mhm.
book isn't published yet. But he was using a specific way to structure his book, or specific titles. So We did. In that first session, we nutted out the whole complete structure of the book, which is huge because it's like, you need that framework in order to have something solid to start from. And he told me many, many times after that first session, he said, in that first session, when you told me that we were going to work out my whole book, I thought, that's impossible. How am I going to do this? And we did. It's just
Wow.
knowing what you need to do to start with. It's like learning a language. If you're learning a foreign language and you start speaking in English, then you're not going to learn the language. You need to start speaking the language in order to learn it. With writing a book, you've got to start with something when you've got nothing. So,
Yes.
and that works every single time.
Now that's so interesting, Gail, because you've worked with me as well, and what you're doing is creating that destination.
Yes.
And we're working in one of our networking groups at the moment with our members around doing a 90-day plan, which is kind of what you've done as well, except it's a bigger plan. And we know that without the destination, so the 90-day plan makes up and goes towards the 5 or 10-year plan. And without that, when people are working on where they want to go in their life, what they want to achieve, then they're completely lost. And what you're doing is bringing that into your book writing program and coaching, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Yes, you need that structure, don't you? Otherwise, you're just fumbling along and getting nowhere.
That's really helpful. That is really helpful, I think, for people, writing a book and starting with that. So
Yeah.
then what happens to them, Gail?
So my next big bit of advice to all my coaching clients and even people who I just speak to, who might be writing a book is just get it all down first. Get it all down. No matter how rough it might be, the most important thing is to get it all down first. Because if you don't have, it's much easier to work with something again than nothing. And it might be rough, but if you try and stop the flow of what's coming out, then by being too much of a perfectionist, then you're never going to get the whole story or the whole book written. So that is, most people find that relatively easy to follow, but some people who do tend to be a bit perfectionist, they find it hard. But then when they let go and do that, then they understand, oh great, so now I've got 6 chapters written, whereas if I'd just been going over and over and over and over chapter 1, I would still be at chapter 1. So that's how, like with the 6-month program or the 3-month program, we get to have a finished draft at the end because you've just got to get it down first, and then comes the harder work almost of getting it into shape. But first of all, getting it down, getting the structure and getting it down.
And I suppose that's where you see the confidence starting to build, where they've got this thing that's shaping, becoming an actual product or an actual end product. It's starting to evolve, and so they can see it, and they've got. I guess we always do get a feeling of achievement and start to feel better about ourselves when we say we're going to do something and then we actually do it. So even with that, you'll be helping them to, keep their own integrity, and all sorts of things will come up for them that will be fulfilled.
That's right. I mean, it's a two-way street, isn't it, with a coach and a client? I mean, there has to be that sort of guidance and direction to get the book out of the head and onto the page. But there's also, the discipline, and so the coach can provide accountability, but there's also the discipline that the writer has to apply, to get that work
Mm.
written. Yeah,
Mm.
so
True.
definitely it's
True.
a relationship for sure.
Yes, and also, if they had this kind of, "Oh, I'd like to do it," kind of thought, but I can't, I don't know how, I'll never
Mm,
achieve it.
mm.
And then you're giving them the tools and the wherewithal to actually achieve it. That's huge too. So what happens as they go through, the process, then tell us a bit more about where you see at the end, where you see your clients at the end and the changes that they've made.
What sorry, can you say that again, Karen? You
As they go
what
through the process and
yeah.
they've got the end product. So
Oh,
let's talk
yes.
about your 6-month program, which is
Okay.
your, like, VIP program, isn't it?
That's right. Yes. Yes.
So tell me a bit more about when they're there, when they've done that and they've got their book ready to be published, is it?
No, no, there's a bit more to it. So that's the first draft, and then I'll just talk about that program because
Mm,
the other one's
mm,
a little bit different.
okay.
But with that program, so when they get to the end of, they've got it all down, and we've been doing, reviews all the way through to sort of, tidy up bits and pieces. But it is essentially a first draft. So then, when they've finished it, I go through the whole book for them and make, a lot of notes and comments and suggestions, and then send it back to them. And then they are then going to, do a bit of rewriting, do a bit of additional writing, maybe take some parts out, maybe move some parts around. So, and then produce the second draft. After the second draft, then it should be ready for editing. And then they go on to knocking on publishers' doors, or if they're lucky, like one of my clients, he's actually been approached by two publishers actually. So he's already, really on his
Wow.
way to getting that book published. Yeah.
So how would the publishers have known about him to approach him, Gail?
I think because he's a well-known person, and he's active on social media and so on. A lot of people who write books are a bit like me; they're introverts, so they find it really hard to promote themselves,
Mm,
and it is really important. It's fantastic if you've got connections in the industry. If
mm,
you don't have connections in the industry, it is quite challenging to get noticed by a publisher because it's all about risk, for the publisher. If you're an
mm,
unknown writer, it's all about, are they prepared to take the risk
mm,
to take you on?
mm,
So a lot of people do self-publish these days, and there's no shame in that whatsoever. It's very common. I mean, the publishing houses have just shrunk. They've merged. There's really not a huge market anymore. So
mm.
um, yeah,
Wow.
that's the alternative for writers who can't get picked up by a mainstream publisher, is to self-publish.
That's really, I'm learning so much, Gail. Let me just check and see what else I wanted to ask you. So I want to ask you, if you were giving mentoring to one of your budding writers, what would you say to them around the secret formula or, your biggest tips?
Sure. In fact, I think I've ruined your question, Karen, because I think I already pretty much answered it.
Is getting
So
the
yes, the structure,
Yeah,
you know, ha getting the structure in place, getting it all down
that's
first,
right. Yes.
and, um, having the accountability and the discipline. So if you're working with a writing coach, obviously they're helping, with the accountability. If you're not,
Mm,
then you have to be accountable to yourself. And that means scheduling, every day. If
mm,
not, maybe you can take the weekends off, but scheduling as the number of hours that you need to get the book written within the time frame, so if it's 3 months or 6 months, then you know how many hours a day you're going to need to work to get that word count. So yeah, and having the discipline to actually sit down and do that, because that's why these people that I work with, that's why they write their books, because that's what they do. They're accountable either to me or to themselves or both, and they have the discipline and they enjoy it. Like, let's not forget the
Yeah.
whole enjoyment thing. They are, they just get transported into another world. So yeah.
Yes. Yes, and I realize that as you were saying it, I have some friends who have written books, or are writing books still, and I notice the things they say around their book achieving their chapter, or writing it or editing it or reading it, and I'm doing this today, and how they do that. Yeah, and I hadn't really thought of it like that. So I love that you do that. First of all, you give them you do the whole thing, like the big picture, and then you work through the detail and give them that accountability and support that they require to get it done. And that's fantastic. That is in a nutshell, isn't it?
It's in a nutshell, yes. And then, along the way, there's a lot of other things that happen, like if they need coaching on certain aspects of writing style or that kind of thing, well, we do all that. And, I've even done quite a bit of research for some clients to help them, achieve the goal within the time they want to achieve it.
And Gail, with regard to the healing type work that you do, or people who are writing and they've got a story that's quite distressing, tell me how you deal with that if they're not sure how much to put in the book, and they do encounter some when they're starting to write it, they start to get involved with some flashback, or get upset or things like that.
Yes.
Does that ever happen with you?
It does. Yes, it does. Working with a man right now who had a very traumatic childhood. And one of the things that he's had to do is sometimes step away from the book. So also having other support people. So, like, I'm a writing coach and I'm empathetic and all of that, but I'm not a counselor and I'm not a psychologist. So people who in the Writing to Heal Metamorphosis program, I have a lot of resources that I can send people to, and other practitioners who I can refer people to. So it's kind of a multi-modality thing when with that. But yeah, look, with Writing to Heal, it's not like producing a book within 3 months or 6 months. It's about whatever medium best expresses your trauma or your challenges, and not, you don't have, it's not about rushing it, because you can't rush something like that. If you have to step back from it, then that's going to be the best thing to do, because sometimes the writing just gets too hard to continue with.
That's, yeah. Next question, Gail. Do you like to learn?
Oh, yes, I do. So in fact, before I started the 6 different coaching programs within, less than 2 years, probably more like 1 year, I think I was doing about 6 different courses, and one of them was with you. So yes, from life coaching to learning about Facebook to learning about LinkedIn and different forms of income for your business. So yes, and as a professional and as an entrepreneur, you need to keep up with everything. And I mean, these days even more so. I mean, in the digital world, if you
Mm,
don't keep up, you're just left behind. So
mm,
yeah, I do love learning, and I mean, it's not, and not just learning for business, but just learning in everyday life and growing.
mm. Yeah, I do think that's a trait, like you say. It's a trait for business owners and entrepreneurs in general that we're always wanting to learn. It's also one of the prime directives of the unconscious mind is that we always want more, we're all seeking more, and we always want to learn more. So it's an unconscious driver as well.
Right.
And some people don't do it, and I don't know how they ignore that, but yeah,
No.
definitely I find that it's a trait with business owners and people who have grown their business, or whether it's paid or not, whether it's an unpaid um, hobby or something they do, that they tend to always want to be learning. So
Yes.
yeah, so you're amongst good company.
Yes.
um, So, Gail, what would be one of your biggest challenges? I think we might have just touched on that then, but you can expand on it if you wish.
One of the biggest challenges. So for me personally, it's probably that being an introvert, it's not easy for me to promote myself in the ways that are probably most beneficial, for me and my business. And that is, like video and things like that. Um, it's much easier, obviously, for me to write a post and feel totally
Mm,
comfortable with that, whereas some
mm,
people find writing very difficult and challenging. Um,
mm,
it's much easier for me to do that than to do a video post, for example. So I think that's probably been throughout my career, having that, promoting myself in the way that I need to promote myself. And, like I do push myself to do things like networking,
mm,
as you know,
mm,
networking
mm.
meetings and things like that. Um, so yes, I guess, it's just about your personality, isn't it? Something is always going to be a little bit harder or a little bit more of a challenge than something else. And that happens to
Mm.
be mine.
That's interesting, Gail. I didn't even think about that introvert thing. I thought you
Okay.
would say something completely different. However, just to let you know, I did go to the Sydney a meetup, the Sydney Business Meetup with the Edzia on Friday, and
Yes.
I met with the guest. One of the guest speakers was a lady by the name of Tori, and she works for LinkedIn in Sydney. And
Oh,
we had a great session. I went up to her afterwards, and we asked her a whole lot of questions. And what was interesting was that she was saying that LinkedIn's algorithms does not hasn't really got it with video. So you
oh,
don't have to worry about video at the moment. Doing a
okay.
post, yes, and doing a post just with photos or a photo or two is where it's at. That's where the algorithms work best, and it's looking for content that's going to be educational for people and
Right.
value.
Yes.
That's when the algorithms work the best. So all we
Oh,
have to
yeah.
do, yeah, is put posts up where we're sharing information, value, and education with a picture. It's better to have just one picture or three or four because two just come out like next to each other like that. So it's not quite as impactful. So there you go. You can happily do your thing the way that you want to do it and just share content around writing a book, Gail.
Well,
Share
thanks.
content and value.
Yes, yeah, thanks for that, Karen. That's good to know. I know, to work on the whole video thing and other platforms, but yes, I do like LinkedIn. I find it a powerful platform, and I enjoy writing the posts and I enjoy giving value through them. So I will continue to do that.
Yes. And as far as video goes, this is like video. This is the best form of video. So you're doing really well.
Thank you.
You're doing a video now because
I know.
it's going through. So the last question is around your long-term big picture and goals.
Yes.
And so what I'd like to ask you, Gail, is what is your dream for your business and or life in, say, the next 5 to 10 years? What would you like to achieve, and where would you like to be in, say, 5 or 10 years?
Sure. So proceeding along the path of book coaching, it's a little bit like where I'm at now, but with more with more focus on the coaching. I have started, to take on editors and train them up so that they can do more of the editing, and so that I can focus on the coaching much more. I'm sure that my coaching programs will kind of refine down too, because as I said, I've got 6 at the moment. 2 of them are 3 of them are self-led, and 3 of them are run in person via Zoom. I feel that I will probably be focusing much more on the in-person programs. So, but I guess like anyone of my age, it's hoping also to slow down a bit and not be working full time, but still continue to do some coaching, because I really love it. So I love helping people write their books and see them grow in confidence and produce something that they're really proud of.
That's fantastic, Gail. Well, that brings us to the end of our interview. So I'd just love to say thank you so much. It wasn't as hard as what I'm sure you thought initially, was it, Gail?
No.
It's always lovely to chat with you. I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed learning more, and I'm sure everyone else who listens to this, either now or in the future, will enjoy listening to your story and your gold nuggets. Now, Gail, how can people get in touch with you?
Yes. So email or phone, maybe just phone.
So what's your, do you have a website?
Sorry, yes. So my website is called Editors. Should I put it in the chat or?
Okay. I don't know if it'll come up for me. But what we'll do is I'll get it off you afterwards, and I'll do a post with this link, and I'll put it in there, your website, your email, if you like, any way that you would like. And of course, you are on LinkedIn, and you are on Facebook.
I am.
And what are you called on LinkedIn? Just your name?
Oh, goodness gracious. Just Gail Tagarro. Yes.
Okay. And on Facebook, do you have a Facebook page, or is
I do. I have a business page on Facebook, so I can give you all of that if you like.
And what's that called, Gail? Just if you tell everyone now as well. Do you remember?
Gosh, it's terrible, isn't it?
I'm sorry, Gail. I'm not putting you on the spot.
No. I'm just checking, but again, it's Editors for You. So
oh yes. Okay. So that's your professional name, is Editors for You.
It is, because that's no, I need to get you back. It is because that's how I can't see you anymore. That's fine.
It's okay. I can see you. We can see you. And so I'll get your contact details, and we'll post a post with them on it for you, Gail, and I'll also share this with you. So let's say goodbye to everybody. Thank you so much, and I'll be in touch with you soon.
Thank you very much, Karen,
Gail,
for having me on.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure. I'll end the broadcast.
Okay.